Have you ever wondered why people treat you like an option, even when you give them everything? Why does your voice get drowned out in rooms where you've earned the right to be heard? Why do you keep showing up with loyalty, patience, and empathy, yet somehow end up being the one overlooked, underestimated, or quietly dismissed? Let me tell you something most people never realize. You are not treated poorly because others are blind. You are treated poorly because, somewhere deep inside, you've learned to shrink. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And nothing shapes your fate faster than the silent belief that you are safer, being small, agreeable, predictable, or endlessly available." But here's the truth you've avoided for years. You were not born to be the background character in your own life. And the moment you stop undervaluing yourself, the world is forced to recalibrate. People change, dynamics shift. Power returns to where it always belonged: your hands. In this video, I'm going to show you 7 psychological tactics that don't just change how people treat you. They change who you become. Stay with me until the end. This may be the turning point you've been waiting for. Before we dive in, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video that helps you evolve from victim to player, from people pleaser to self-led individual. Maybe you won't admit it out loud, but you felt it. That silent sting when someone interrupts you mid-sentence. The way your suggestions at work suddenly become someone else's idea, the moment someone you care deeply about takes hours to reply to your message, but answers others within minutes. There's a particular kind of pain in being invisible while standing right in front of people. And if you're honest, you've felt it more times than you can count. You tell yourself, "It's fine. I don't want to cause trouble. I don't want to seem needy." But deep down, something aches. Because you know, if you treated people the way they treat you, they'd call you distant, cold, or selfish. Yet when they do it to you, it's just normal. And here's the part that hurts the most. You've normalized it too. You learned early, maybe in childhood, maybe in your first relationship, maybe in your first job, that being low maintenance made people like you. That staying quiet kept the peace. That being available would make you indispensable. That giving more would eventually make someone choose you. But somewhere along the way, something twisted. Your kindness became an expectation. Your patience became permission. Your silence became submission. Your availability became currency that everybody could spend. And you became the emotional safety net, the reliable one, the steady one, the person who gives but receives crumbs in return. Let me guess, you say yes when your whole body wants to say no. You reply instantly because you fear what will happen if you don't. You over-explain because you're afraid of being misunderstood. You stay longer in situations that drain your soul because you're terrified of being alone. You try to prove your worth by being valuable, but only end up being used. I know this pattern. I lived in it myself. There was a time when I believed that being good, patient, and understanding would make people treat me better. But all it did was teach them that I was endlessly flexible, and therefore endlessly bendable. And here is a truth you won't like but need to hear. You did not become undervalued because you are weak. You became undervalued because you abandoned yourself to stay connected to others. Carl Jung called this the wound of the persona. The mask you created to be loved slowly became the cage that keeps you small. And the world reacts not to your soul, but to the mask you show them. Think about your workplace. You show up early, you work harder than everyone, you carry the invisible weight. But someone louder gets the credit. Think about your relationships. You give love in high definition, but receive affection in low resolution. You pour your heart out, but they barely open theirs. You communicate clearly, but they remain emotionally illiterate. Think about your friendships. You're the one people call when they're breaking. But when you break, the room goes silent. And why? Because you trained them to believe your emotional labor is free. You taught them that your time is disposable. You condition them to think you don't need anything in return. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept yourself completely, because the moment you do, you stop tolerating whatever threatens your sense of self. You stop chasing. You stop shrinking. You stop explaining your worth and start embodying it." But before we get there, you must understand something essential. You're not being mistreated because people are cruel. You're being mistreated because you've become predictable, and predictability breeds disregard. In a world where scarcity creates value, you've made yourself emotionally abundant. And people take abundance for granted every single time. This ends now. Because once you understand why the undervaluing happens, you can break the cycle. You can shift the dynamic. You can reclaim the authority over how you're treated. But it starts with recognition. And recognition begins with truth, even when the truth stings. If any part of your story just echoed through this chapter, I want you to share your experience in the comments. Tell me the moment you realized you were undervaluing yourself. I read every comment and I'll respond to as many as I can because your story matters. Most people think they're undervalued because others fail to recognize their worth. But the truth is far more internal, far more psychological, and far more uncomfortable. You're not undervalued because people can't see your value. You re-undervalued because you've been unconsciously participating in a dynamic that teaches the world to overlook you. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Is the fate you've been living without realizing you're the one sustaining it? The first reason is something Jung described as the persona, the mask you present to the world. You created it early in life, the agreeable one, the easy one, the helpful one, the reliable one. Maybe you were raised in an environment where expressing needs led to conflict, so you stayed quiet. Maybe your family praised you for being polite, calm, and cooperative. Maybe you learned that being low maintenance was the only way to be loved. This persona protected you once, but somewhere along the way, it became your identity. The problem with personas is simple. They hide the very traits that command respect. When people only see your pleasing mask, they treat you like a role, not a person. You become predictable, safe, and non-disruptive. In other words, easy to undervalue. Behind that persona is your shadow, the part of you you were taught to suppress. Everything unacceptable, anger, boundaries, self-respect, ambition, gets pushed into the dark. But the psyche doesn't delete what it hides, it simply redirects it. Repressed anger turns into guilt. Repressed boundaries turn into overgiving. Repressed self-worth turns into tolerating disrespect. When you suppress the shadow, you don't become nicer. You become easier to use. People sense the absence of inner edges. They feel they can take more than they give. They feel you won't push back. And so, unintentionally, you attract people who benefit from your softness while offering very little in return. Another psychological force shaping your experience is availability. Human beings value what is scarce and overlook what is abundant. This isn't manipulation, it's basic neurobiology. We pay attention to what we might lose, what has limits, and what has boundaries. But you've made yourself emotionally unlimited. You respond instantly. You adjust your schedule. You downplay your needs. You forgive too quickly. You show up even when you're exhausted. You stay reachable even when you need rest. Your availability sends a message you never intended. My presence requires no effort. When something requires no effort, the human mind automatically assigns it less value. You're not being treated poorly because you lack worth. You're treated poorly because you've removed the psychological friction that creates value. Then comes the issue of power perception, something Machiavelli understood profoundly. He argued that people respond not to your intentions, but to the signals your behavior emits. If you over-explain, people perceive uncertainty. If you justify every boundary, people perceive weakness. If you tolerate disrespect, people perceive permission. Humans are always scanning for hierarchy, even subconsciously. And when you present yourself as endlessly patient, endlessly forgiving, endlessly flexible, the impression you create is not kindness, it's powerlessness. Not because you are powerless, but because you act as if you have no internal lines that cannot be crossed. This leads into the cycle of self-abandonment, a pattern nearly every undervalued person experiences. It starts with overgiving. You give too much because giving makes you feel needed. Others acclimate to your overgiving. Soon, what was once generosity becomes expectation. You begin to feel drained, unseen, and unappreciated. Instead of pulling back, you give even more, hoping that extra effort will finally make someone recognize your value. But the opposite happens. They offer even less because your effort now signals desperation. You resent them but stay silent because silence feels safer than conflict. Eventually, you break either through withdrawal or emotional collapse, and suddenly you're labeled the problem, even though the real issue began the moment you abandoned yourself in the hope of being valued. The final layer of this dynamic comes from Nietzsche's idea of self-overcoming. Nietzsche believed human beings suffer not because the world is cruel, but because they betray their own potential. You betray your potential every time you shrink your voice, soften your truth, or swallow your boundaries to be accepted. You betray it every time you dim your presence to avoid discomfort. You betray it every time you choose peace on the outside, while creating war inside yourself. Nietzsche said, "Become who you are." That means stepping toward your inner strength rather than away from it. People respect those who respect themselves. They value those who value their energy. They treat seriously those who carry themselves from a center of self-trust rather than self-erasure. Your patterns were not chosen consciously, but now that you see them, you're no longer trapped by them. Awareness is the beginning of power. To understand how undervaluing yourself shapes the way people treat you, let's look at 3 real-life scenarios you've probably lived through. These examples aren't hypothetical. They're patterns millions silently endure without realizing they can be changed. 1. The workplace. Becoming the reliable but overlooked employee. Imagine a workplace where you consistently deliver more than you're asked. You double-check details others ignore. You show up early, stay late, and step in when someone drops the ball. You don't complain because you think your hard work will speak for itself. But what happens? Someone louder gets the promotion. Someone bolder gets the recognition. Someone less capable gets the raise. And you, the backbone of the operation, are barely acknowledged. Why? Because you accidentally communicated that you don't need recognition to stay loyal. Your silence made you blend in. Your reliability made you invisible. Your manager doesn't think she deserves more. They think she's fine with less. It's not personal. It's psychological. When you never advocate for yourself, the system assigns you the lowest value by default. 2. Relationships. The emotional giver and the emotional taker. Now imagine your relationship. You initiate every conversation, plan every date, and solve every conflict. You check in even when you're tired. You apologize first, even when you weren't the one who broke something. You try to keep the peace because you're terrified of losing the connection. But the relationship becomes lopsided. Your partner stops initiating. They stop trying. They stop meeting you halfway. You begin to feel like you're carrying the entire emotional weight. The worst part? When you finally express your needs, they call you dramatic or needy. But it's not that your needs are too much. It's that your partner has grown used to giving you the minimum, and you've taught them it was enough. When one person undervalues themselves, the relationship collapses into imbalance. Not because the other person is cruel, but because you've lowered the standard for how you expect to be loved. 3. Friendships. The listener who never gets heard finally. Think about your friendships. You're the one everyone calls when they're falling apart. You answer at midnight, rearrange your schedule, and listen for hours. You give thoughtful advice, emotional support, and space for others to land. But when you need support, your messages get read hours later, your pain gets minimized. Your struggles get brushed off with, "You're strong, you'll be fine." You've accidentally branded yourself as the friend who doesn't need anything, the caretaker, the emotional anchor, the one who's always okay, but you're not always okay. You've just learned to hide it so well that no one recognizes your silence as a cry for help. Friendships drift, not because people don't care, but because you never taught them how to show up for you. These examples reveal one truth. People treat you according to the standard you set through your behavior, not the worth you carry inside. And once you start shifting the behaviors, boundaries, and energy that define your presence, the way people respond to you transforms almost instantly. Before we move on, I want you to comment and tell me, which of these examples felt like it was describing your life? Work, love, or friendships? Share your story. I read every comment. If you've been undervalued for years, it's not because you lack worth. It's because you've been operating from a version of yourself that never learned how to protect it. These 7 tactics aren't tricks. They're psychological realignments, shifts in energy, boundaries, and identity that force the world to recalibrate around you. This is where your transformation begins. Take a breath. You might feel resistance as you read this. That's good. It means the old self is starting to loosen. Let's begin. Tactic 1. Reduce your availability. You don't need to disappear. You only need to become intentional. Human beings are wired to respect what isn't immediately accessible. This doesn't mean you go cold. It means you stop being emotionally on call. Stop replying instantly. Stop rushing to fix things for others. Stop rearranging your life to accommodate people who barely adjust theirs. When your presence becomes a choice, not a reflex, people start treating it like something valuable. Space creates gravity, and gravity creates respect. Tactic 2. State your needs without apology. You've spent years softening your truth to keep the peace. But unspoken needs don't disappear. They ferment into resentment. The next time you feel disappointed, hurt, or overlooked, don't hide it. Say it calmly. Say it once. Say it without wrapping it in a 3-paragraph justification. Your needs are not an inconvenience. They're a map of your emotional reality. Speak to them with clarity, not shame. Because the moment you treat your needs as legitimate, others follow. Tactic 3. Break predictable patterns right now. You're operating on autopilot. People know exactly how you will react. You'll forgive quickly. You'll agree easily. You'll say, "It's fine," even when it's not. Predictability kills respect. Want to change how people treat you? Interrupt the script. Take longer to respond. Say, "Let me think about it." Decline invitations when you're drained. Disagree, even if your voice shakes. When people can no longer predict you, they can no longer take you for granted. Tactic 4. Build micro boundaries. Most people think boundaries mean big confrontations, but real boundaries happen in quiet moments. Micro boundaries look like ending conversations when you feel drained, not explaining why you can't do something, leaving messages on read until you have space, saying, "No, that won't work for me," not absorbing emotions that aren't yours. Each small boundary sends a powerful message. I belong to myself first. People don't value what dissolves into them. They value what stands on its own. Tactic 5. Reclaim your time and attention. Your attention is your currency. In modern psychology, attention signals value. Whatever you give consistent attention to becomes personally important. But you've been giving your attention away like spare change, to people who drain you, to conversations that deplete you, to situations that don't grow you. From now on, treat your attention as something sacred. Give it where you see effort. Give it where you feel safe. Give it where reciprocity exists. Withdraw it where you feel dismissed. The fastest way to shift how someone treats you. Shift what you give your attention to. Tactic 6. Speak with less justification. You think explaining yourself makes you look considerate. In reality, it makes you look uncertain. I can't because I'm exhausted, and I haven't slept and I feel bad. But maybe I can later. No. Your boundary does not need a documentary. Say it simply, I won't make it. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available. I'm leaving now. The fewer words you use, the stronger your presence becomes. People respect conciseness. They respect clarity. They respect someone who says what they mean. Tactic 7. Become the source, not the pleaser you've been chasing value. But power comes when you become the one who generates it. The pleaser adapts to avoid rejection. The source stands in its truth and allows others to adapt. The pleaser bends. The source centers. The pleaser reacts. The source chooses. Becoming the source means you stop managing people's emotions and start managing your energy. You stop chasing approval and start cultivating self-trust. You stop hoping to be chosen and begin choosing yourself. When you become a source, people feel the shift instantly. They no longer sense desperation, they sense gravity. And gravity is what draws respect, attraction, and reciprocity. The emotional climax, the you that's been waiting. Here's the truth you've been avoiding. You don't need these tactics to manipulate the world. You need them to reclaim yourself. Your voice, your time, your edges, your center, your worth. Every tactic above is a doorway back to yourself. Because the moment you stop undervaluing who you are, the world adjusts. It doesn't happen slowly. It happens immediately because you stop showing up as the version of you that tolerates being overlooked. And that moment, that shift in energy is the beginning of a new life. Before we move on, comment below. Which tactic is already speaking to you the loudest? Which one do you want to try first? I'll read your comments. Your awakening matters. Take a moment. Let everything you've heard so far settle into your chest. Because what you're feeling right now, the slight heaviness, the clarity, the discomfort, the flicker of hope is not an accident. It's the beginning of a rebirth. For most of your life, you've carried a silent belief. If I make myself smaller, softer, easier, maybe I'll finally be valued. But shrinking never brought you the safety you hoped for. It only brought you invisibility. People didn't see you because you hid the parts of you that were born to be seen. Your truth, your boundaries, your fire, your voice, your need for reciprocity, your longing to be met not half-heartedly, but fully. You kept giving the world a watered-down version of yourself, hoping someone would notice the ocean inside you. But no one can see your depth when you keep presenting yourself as shallow. Listen carefully. The world has never been waiting for your perfection. It's been waiting for your presence. Carl Jung said that the greatest act of courage is to become who you truly are, to stop wearing the persona that keeps you loved, and start embodying the self that keeps you whole. And I know how terrifying that feels, because I was once where you are. I know what it's like to tolerate too much, to expect too little, to stay silent in spaces that suffocated me. I know the ache of feeling unseen, the exhaustion of being the emotional provider, the quiet resentment of carrying connections that others abandoned long ago. I know what it's like to doubt your worth so deeply that you hope kindness will compensate for your self-erasure. But I also know what happens the moment you finally rise. People who once overlooked you begin to recalibrate. Those who relied on your silence suddenly feel the weight of your voice. Those who took you for granted sense the shift in your energy. Those who misread your softness as weakness finally realize you were strong all along. You just hadn't learned how to stand in it. And you begin to meet yourself for the very first time. This is what individuation looks like. Not becoming a new person, but returning to the person you were before the world convinced you to shrink. When you stop undervaluing yourself, something extraordinary happens. You no longer chase people. You no longer beg for respect. You no longer tolerate crumbs. You no longer apologize for existing. You no longer explain your worth. you embody it. Life becomes quieter, but clearer. Relationships become fewer, but deeper. Your time becomes limited, but meaningful. Your energy becomes precious and therefore protected. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you begin to feel something you haven't felt in years, a sense of ownership over your life. Let today be the moment everything shifts. Not because I said so, but because something inside you knows you've been waiting for this. If this video awakened something in you, if even one sentence hit a nerve, don't let that feeling fade. Act on it. Stand up straighter. Speak slower. Say no sooner. Choose yourself first. And before you leave, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another video designed to awaken the part of you that's been asleep for too long. Now tell me in the comments, what was the one insight, sentence, or realization in this video that hit you the deepest? Your story matters. Your rise begins now.